Wait. Oh, you are starting?
Okay, go ahead now, say it.
My question always is for kids with high incidence disabilities, why are we doing evals? Why isn't coaching, consideration, and consultation enough? Because again, it's based on the expert model, right? And we're trying, like I always say, I'm trying to move I'm trying to work myself out of a job, and it's not happening.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think a lot
I
of it,
will
Karen, is
say,
exactly that. People are unsure about the consideration process, or they just don't follow it effectively. And uh, coaching is not as prevalent as we'd like to think it is. I think.
It's
I
been
would like to
working
think.
really well this year, though, thank goodness. But Sarah wanted to say
Yeah,
something.
go ahead, Sarah.
I know I wasn't sure if my microphone is it working.
Now it is. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. But I was gonna say that we've been pretty successful in shifting that within our district. The only problem is if we are asking for like funding for a device, then that
Yeah.
of course is still gonna be like a very comprehensive eval and report.
Right.
But if it's something that's just being funded within our district, or we're just saying like, oh, we need a few AT supports for this student, then I'm always putting it on the IEP as consult, not as an eval, because then it's like, of course, it's more ongoing. When we put it on as an eval, then you have like those 60 days that you have to get it done, and there has to be this report and stuff like that. So we've been pretty successful in just switching that up within our district, but then there's still times where for other funding sources, we do have to do something
Yeah.
more.
And that makes sense for funding, especially around communication devices. But, with technology so ubiquitous and it's readily available like never before, and especially now with people with remote and hybrid learning, teachers are using more of the technology, although I'm still shocked how much paper they're still using, even in a remote environment.
Agreed.
Does anyone else see that? Yeah, Lauren, you're
Yeah,
shaking your head. Yeah,
see it a
Irene
lot
too.
too. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's discouraging at times. We're having this conversation of I just had this conversation with the team last week, and their struggle that they came to me with was how to effectively get paper to students' houses. And I had to stop the conversation. I'm like, look, and I've worked with this team for years now. So I'm like, look, you guys know me, but I'm gonna be real upfront with you right now. What are we doing? What are we doing? Why is this driving force? Can we reframe it to how can we provide effective instruction to all these students, and
Yeah.
then continue the conversation on? And by the end, we got to a point where everybody had those moments of, oh, we don't really need to send any paper home. And I thought, oh, there's a win right there. That was a
Woohoo!
positive,
Mike,
like,
how did you bring them through that process? Because, it is a huge paradigm shift for many teachers.
yeah. It was asking a lot of those questions, and we always say this when we talk about consideration and coaching and things like that, asking a lot of questions. They had a problem. The problem was getting paper to someone's house. And so the first question was why?
Yeah.
Why does that paper need to get to their house? Well, they need to do the assignment. Okay. What is the assignment? What are you trying to have them show that they know? And we just continued to dig down into it and dig and dig and dig, and got them to a point where I didn't tell them they shouldn't do paper. I got them to a point where someone said, we shouldn't be doing paper. And then it's like, okay, yeah, that's great. Now, how can we do? Then it flipped at that moment, Karen, that took about, oh God, it felt like it took hours, but it probably only took 15 minutes maybe, but it felt like part of a day.
But again, even hearing how the process can work, like asking questions, what's the purpose? What's the point? What are you trying to get the students to be able to do? What's your current methodology? That sort of thing. And what are your students' strengths and areas to strengthen? Having that conversation. That's great, Mike.
Yeah. And it was nice because it got some people in the team. It was probably a group of, maybe it was 8 or 10 people. And there are talkers who talk every time. That's like 3 of us. And then there are 7 people who rarely talk, but then sometimes don't even have their camera on, and will sometimes add in the chat, which is great. That's fine too. But I have to say, in this conversation, it was a perfect example. Some of the people in the chat were the most progressive thinkers in the group, but yet were afraid to turn the mic on to share it. And so they put it in the chat and had to be kind of drawn in a little bit in the conversation. And, you know, by ways of saying like, oh, I see so-and-so just put this in the chat. And I'd love to hear more about that because I think that's a great idea. And then eventually got them to turn their mics on. And it was one lady in the chat who rarely, I mean, I've known her for years and she barely said a dozen words to me. She was the one who said to the group, I don't think paper's a good idea at all. Like she turned her mic on and said that. And I was like, well, look at this. Let me just mute my mic for a second and just sit quietly. And then I let them hash it out a little bit, which was nice. So,
Yeah.
I don't know,
That's
anybody
great.
else? Hi, Cassie.
Hi, I'm just actually thinking I was going to put it in chat, but then I'm just thinking about this though, too, as we're going back face to face. Think of how many people aren't comfortable speaking up at a staff meeting or in a group meeting or our students in class. And this chat's given them a way to communicate. So I've been kind of starting to work with people and talking about how can we try to retain some of that when we go back face to face? Because there's some staff when I've sat in meetings that I've never heard speak.
Yeah.
And when they're one-on-one, they'll tell you all sorts of stuff, but they'll never bring it up in a group. And students the same way.
Yeah,
so
and
now
don't
that we
have great ideas, Cassie, don't they have great ideas too? And you're like, oh, I just wish you would say that to the larger group.
Yeah, but it's easier in chat. You
Yeah.
know, you don't have that same level of, of fear of public speaking. What if I stumble over my words, And so, how can we kind of do some of those back end things during face-to-face meetings or during our classrooms? Can we use Padlets? Can we use Wakelets? Can we use chat things, and have those up on a normal day?
Yeah, we've been trying in some of the meetings I've been working with people because I sense that they're struggling, some of them still. I'm trying to introduce to them a new back channel tool every time we meet. So one time it's a Padlet, the next time it will be a Menti, the following time it'll be a Jamboard. It's just something, and then it's a nice opportunity to say, hey, like while we're in our meeting, let's look at this piece of tech, but let's use it at the same time, and then maybe we'll get a sense of how it works and how we might be able to use it. And that's been kind of a nice way to find the tools that people are more interested in. Like I found that I got a lot of response through a Menti. And so I asked a lot of people, why was I getting so many responses? Which sounded funny. Like, why am I being so successful right now? But why is this being so successful? And to a person, they were like, that thing's really easy. And I just punched that into my phone. And I had my phone working at the same time as I was talking. Oh, Irene, what are you doing? Irene, you're sharing your screen. It was so loud.
I don't mean to be. I'm trying to. I clicked wrong.
You're welcome to share your screen,
Yeah,
Irene.
No, there's nothing exciting on my screen at the moment, honestly. I just can't find the meeting anymore on my.
That's because you're sharing your screen. Wait a second. I'm gonna help you. I think. I don't know.
But I think this whole conversation points to that whole instructional method called participation.
Yeah.
And
thank you.
Welcome.
And participation is challenging for students and their educators. And I think, like that's Cassie, or who was it that said, and Mike, you're talking about alternative ways for people to have voices. Right. And I think that's an important conversation for educators to have in thinking about their own learners, because there are many different reasons why people will not participate, whether they're students or educators. So just offering, that's what universal design is all about. That's what our inclusive technology is all about, giving everyone a voice and an independent voice. So those are important conversations to have as well.
Well, I think that's a great point, because I'm even thinking back, even just for going back to the simple thing of asking for help. Some kids are really hesitant to ask for help. So we come up with these great things, cards on your desk. When you flip it this way, I know that you have a question and I can come to you. And I feel like this whole use of chat and this digital learning has really kind of brought that a step further then. So I think if we can tie it in, even staff are kind of used to that. Like kids aren't comfortable asking for help. Here's how we do all these little things. Okay, now let's take that a step further. Kids that aren't comfortable talking, but yet when we've been in a virtual environment, they're like chatting like mad. What can we do now? So I think if we can kind of tie that into things they're already familiar with. And a lot of teachers are really great about, oh, well, you have a cup and when you flip it over on your desk, I know you need help, or, the red, yellow, green cards. Or so if we can kind of tie this same type of conversation to something that our staff already know, it might help them kind of understand or grasp why we want to do it. And kind of, I'm guessing there's a lot of ideas out there that I haven't had on how to do this in classrooms. So I think if we get our teachers thinking about it, we're going to have some really great stuff coming up.
And I think they are thinking about it, Cassie, don't you think? I've seen people make this transition over the past year of, I can't even log into Zoom, to now it's the same people who I'm talking to who have all three of the windows open at the same time. Right? They have the chat layered with the participant list, with the actual presentation. And there's not this kind of fear anymore.
I'm seeing that in the virtual world. It's as we're going back face to face that I'm seeing one of two. Either I'm seeing people that are coming back face to face and they are like using this plethora of tools that they learned and they're like bringing them back in face to face. And I also have other people who are like, we're back face to face. We're not touching technology. There will be no more chat. There will be no more Chromebooks. Put them away. And so I feel like we need to try to find a way to but there were some really good parts of that too. Even if you don't want to bring it all back, let's talk about the good stuff. So Mike, I agree with you. I see in the virtual learning, oh my gosh, so much progress. I can't even, our teachers have been phenomenal. But as we're coming back, we have two very different viewpoints. And so I feel like if we can try to tie in some of here was a positive about it, here's how your kids were talking to you. Let's even use it for that to start. Instead of just, what is it? Baby with the bathwater. Isn't there a saying, you get rid of everything?
Throw out the baby with the bathwater.
Yeah. Something like that, which was always disturbing.
And when I hear you say that was my biggest fear through this whole thing, is that we would go back and people would just flip the switch and be like, well, all right, well, that was something, huh? And
how can that be possible? Can that even really be possible now? Because learners are used to a very different learning environment. And will they be willing to go back to a 6.5-hour day of, moving from one room to another and sitting and, isn't it going to inspire, hopefully for progressive districts, reimagining what it can look like? I mean, we can really start from scratch almost. High school can look very different, middle school and elementary. So yeah. Kathy, are you in a district?
I am right now, yes.
Yeah, and Leslie, you're in a district. Well, actually, a lot of you are in your, Leslie, great to see you. Hi. So it's also good to hear, what you are experiencing, because Mike and I are consultants, so we're in a lot of districts, right. But, and so the experience is very different, but I'd love to see what you see is happening in your district, and if you see they've moved the cheese to a different place.
So far, we're not seeing any big changes as far as structure, time, everything. We're going back to, everybody wants to go back to normal. That's where we're at right now. Everybody wants to get back to normal. And so I'm hoping that as we get to the fall and we've had kind of a break and we've had a reset, I'm hoping we'll be able to have some reflection. I don't see any of those big systems, Karen, which I would love to see change. I don't see any of those big systems changing anytime soon, at least by us. We're still going to be 7 or 8 periods a day, Monday through Friday. But I'm hoping that after a break, after, not, oh my gosh, we're all online and we're so happy to be back in the classroom. I'm hoping we'll see more of a blend in the fall where teachers are like, you know what, some of that worked really well. Let's see how I can blend this.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, Karen, and of course, Karen, that I agree with your thought there. But in reality, your thought, what you said is hard. And it takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of commitment to make that kind of change. And even just like Cassie just described, people are going to just go back with moments of reflection, perhaps. That might make a change.
But is that good?
Forward.
If we're going back to what the educators feel comfortable with, is that really fair to the learners?
But I'm also going to bring up that this is also beyond what the teachers want or even what the school wants. When we're looking at our community, Our community wants kids back in school Monday through Friday, these
Mhm.
hours, because that's what they need to be able to go back to work.
Right.
You know, our DPI and our recommendations for years has been you need this many of educational hours in a day. And so our school board is going to say you need to have the students in the classroom. You need to have them in front of a teacher. You don't want. So this is a much bigger policy, I think, than what any one teacher or one school building or one district even would want. Because this is, I mean, the changes that you're talking about, Karen, in order to be great, are policy wide, they're district, they're community wide.
Right.
And I think it'd be amazing. I'm like right there with you. You create it, I will be right there on your side. But unfortunately, I don't think it can be as fast as we would like it to be, because it goes so far beyond. It's funding, it's policies, it's laws, it's special education rules. It's
I also think people have had to have so much change for the last year that they don't want to have to go into another new. And embedding the two together right away is another new. It's more comfortable to go back to what they know and then look to change in the future.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate because, and I'm sure we all recognize, the further we get away from the change, the longer the normal was allowed to be returned, the less chance we're going to have of making change. You know, it's going to become more comfortable. Oh, and then it's just like, and then it becomes a story that educators tell, educators who taught through the year 2020, remember when, right?
Mm.
I mean, I have a mom who told me at one of these schools that I support, if her son never went back to the classroom, she would be thrilled. He is just completely excelling at home because of the flexibility of his day.
But see, that's the other important point, Mike. Some kids are
I agree
absolutely
100%.
thriving. So
Yeah.
what do we do about that? You know,
Mhm.
I absolutely agree with everything you've said, Cassie, the reality, but there is a subset of kids who are absolutely thriving. We're not
Yes.
seeing school phobias, because school anxiety and school phobias were skyrocketing.
Yeah.
We're not seeing, you know, those social, um, the pragmatics issues. You know, they are not as apparent when you're in an online environment. And so how do we blend that? How do we take that reality and put it into what school looks like next year?
Yeah.
You know, and what you guys both just brought up might be kind of the direction that's going to go. Because, Mike, if that parent is saying, I don't want my child back in, parents have a lot of input in this. If they enroll their child, and we have more parents enrolling their children in their online schools options or, you know, virtual learning options, the public school systems are also going to have to start being aware, because they're going to be losing students. They're going to be having to put more staff in their virtual programs. And that might be where those conversations start coming, Karen, is, you know, the parents, when they say, you know, my kid did better virtually. And I've had a lot of students I work with that do better virtually.
Yeah.
You know,
This
that might
mom
make
has said, yeah, this mom has said that she's made this statement to her IEP team. I want to discuss what his education looks like going forward, not in the classroom or in some kind of modified version of the classroom. And so, you know, she's pushing the envelope a little bit because she is so set on this idea that this is working. I mean, she sent me a video of just a part of his day, and he looks like a completely different student that I saw last year. He's totally different. And it's because he's walking around the house with this Chromebook and he's listening to his teachers with his camera off, and no one's complaining. Bonus points. He's got his camera off, but he's listening. But he moves from place to place in the house, and he sits down and he listens for a minute. Then he takes his Chromebook and he moves around again. He's on the floor. He's in his bedroom. He's by the TV. He's by the front door. He at one point had 3 separate things open in front of him. His Chromebook where his teacher was talking, his iPad because he was looking something up that his teacher was talking about, and he had another device next to him like a Kindle Fire, which was playing music at the same time. And it was such a great, I wish she'd let me share these pictures,
Yeah.
but she won't.
Well,
It was great though.
and those kids with attentional issues, they disappear in
Yeah.
a home environment.
Right.
a lot of times, not all the time. So the
Yeah,
kids
right,
with
right.
technical issues, the kids on the spectrum, the kids with social anxiety, school phobias, that subset is doing better
Yeah.
in this environment. And then there are others who are not. There are other
Right.
kids who are
Sure.
just, they need the structure for whatever reason. They
Mhm.
need, they need to, but the other thing too is they need that constant check-in with the teacher, which to me promotes dependence. So I'm hoping that maybe, this kind of remote learning also can promote independence as well, and they can take initiative and feel more engaged. But I like Lauren's comment about concurrent teaching models. Is that a thing?
Yeah, sorry, I was just kind of typing a really long answer because I didn't want to interrupt. But
Do you want to hit send to it and then continue to talk?
sure. Okay, so that's what I
Okay,
got so
great.
far. So we have the students in our school division have had an option to either be hybrid, which means 2 days a week in person, 2 days a week virtual, synchronous live with their
Right.
teacher, and 1 day a week asynchronous. So Monday is always the asynchronous day, and then kids either go, because of like the distancing and for a lot of different reasons, transportation, cleaning procedures, everything like that, we can have kids in either like Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, Friday. So some students are in doing that model, and some students are in virtual, 4 days a week of synchronous live with their teacher, and 1 day is asynchronous. So everybody has that Monday asynchronous day in our division. So to line it up, kids stuck with their teacher regardless of the model that their family selected for them to go back to school till the end of June. So some teachers from 3rd grade through 12th grade are teaching some kids live in person and some kids virtual concurrently. Now, this takes a lot of skill and a lot of thinking so that you don't always have the virtual kids in one group and the live kids in another group. And, I've done this when I've done my university teaching, because we had a consortium that I taught across Virginia. And so we had students at 5 or 6 sites. And so some students would be live some students would be virtual from their home. One professor would be teaching from, like, I would teach live either from UVA or George Mason, and my other students would be at Radford, Norfolk, VCU. They'd be all over the state of Virginia. And then we had some students who were so far away from a university campus that they would just be at home. So it was always concurrent, so that you had some few students that were there live with you and some that were away. But I tried not to be, this is really hard. And so because it's a whole new way of teaching. So the school division said pre-K, K1 and 2 are going to be with a teacher that's either the hybrid in-person teacher, or one teacher will be like assigned to virtual. Anybody that selected virtual will then like go to that teacher, and the other ones will be depending on that. But it changed the whole master schedule, and kids had to change teachers. And we've got kindergartners who've never been in buildings before, and they had one teacher at the beginning of the year, and now they have a different teacher. And that's like such a headache. So it's not perfect. It's really challenging. And I think like what's really challenging too, even for like my son, he was saying, I really want to be, so my son has a lot of service in the area of social emotional self-regulation, getting all that additional like one-on-one support, but academically like flies. We all know kids like this. So he really, really wanted to go back to school. And he's like, I really, really want to go. And he has all this anxiety and everything. And I'm like, oh God, I don't know, this is going to be a good choice. And so as a parent, this was really hard. And I had to say, okay, you really want to go back hybrid, you want to be face-to-face, and virtual has not been going very well. So I was like, okay, let's do this. But there's no flexibility. If it doesn't work out for him, then he has to like switch teachers for a 3rd time this school year. And then that one teacher that's like the virtual teacher gets totally overloaded. So there's some downsides of this like black and white whenever we make a decision like that, that they're all in or all out. It's hard. So.
And you said a really important thing, Lauren, that I'm curious how this went. You said this idea of teaching this way is hard, which I totally agree. Were the staff given training and support of how to make this jump?
Yeah, we did have some professional learning, and I participated in it because I was just curious what they were going to say. And some of it was pretty basic, about like how to do stations and how to do this. I'm like, I feel like the teachers know this stuff. It's more like time to plan and like scramble everything up, right? Like just like we all did when, March, whatever, 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, whenever your division went to COVID land. So it's like they have that ability to do it, but I feel like they just need somebody to coach them through thinking about this or ask them questions that's going to make them shift their thinking. Because I think they have the skills. Hillary's like, yeah, right?
Yeah.
These are really skilled teachers, and they've shown that they can pivot like this and they can do it. And if they come up with the idea themselves, it's going to be much better than listening to somebody give a professional learning. And I listened to her and I thought she was really, she had all the right ideas, but unless they come up with it themselves, or there's just not skin in the game there to do it. And I don't know.
It would feel like they'd be better served at times from something like I think this community is every week.
Yeah.
Where it's not really about it's not one of us speaking at the rest of us every week. It's us just working through it with an understanding that we all have some skills here that we can use to do this, and then figuring out how to go forward. And that could be so much more valuable. Just those check-ins and that coaching piece. I'm just been loving that more and more because it just feels more productive right now.
I was going to add too that I just think that we always say with the students, I always think of Karen when I say it too about presuming competence. We have to do the same for our teachers.
Yes.
We need to presume competence for them. I work and I am not only doing the assistive tech, but I also support all of the teachers in my district from a tech perspective. And I always say to them, don't underestimate yourselves. They've all been able to rise to the occasion, some more than others naturally, and some it comes a little bit more naturally too. But they're all doing it. There are definitely, I wrote this in the chat, there's definitely some concerns about having that concurrent, live and in-person model from a management perspective, for sure, especially on the elementary level. And also there have been concerns that have been posed about, I don't want to say exposing because that's not the right word, but just opening up for children that do have, needs within the classroom and, have the one-to-one aid that's sitting there. Now this is broadcasted into people's homes, that families are seeing. So it's that privacy piece as well that has come up as a concern too, where teachers are like, well, or parents have said, I don't know how I feel about that, because now, and I've seen it too. I was a remote teacher this year. I was reassigned temporarily for 2 weeks to take over for a teacher who was out, and I saw that, you can see the children who maybe need a little bit more support. And that is definitely, unless you do it in a way, I was doing, one-on-one breakout rooms so that if kids did need extra support, it wasn't so obvious to everybody else, in the class, and the other parents weren't seeing who needed to raise their hand every 5 seconds for help. But, there's this other component of it too. But for my own family, we were quarantined for 2 weeks. My husband and my youngest son were sick, and we thankfully one of the weeks fell over the vacation. So I was like, all right, 1 week of school we don't have to worry about. But my school, I was like, oh my God. But my school district where my kids go, they do not offer the virtual model when you're quarantined. Whereas where I work, when you're quarantined, you have the option to enroll into one of our virtual classes, or you can just ask for certain work to be sent home and do it that way. Because some parents don't feel that they can manage that. So, and I love that my district offers that as an option. Where I live, they do not. So, my kids were given work to be sent home, and that was it. And had we been out for the 2 weeks, that would have been 2 weeks that my kids really missed, any sort of real live instruction. So, then it goes back to what Lauren's saying about that concurrent model and being able to have that flexibility of maneuvering in and out of settings. And I don't know, it's just, I don't feel like there's a real right answer to this because it's very, very tricky.
Right.
But I do think at the end of the day that the teachers just need to kind of like rip the Band-Aid off and be like, let's do this. You know, we're going to do it the best that we can. And, you know, baptism by fire, that, you know, you just do it and learn it.
Right.
Yeah, I think as I was reflecting, I think one of the other things that's so hard that I feel like about this, because it's not really hard. Our teachers are so taxed. They are just done. They have the ability to do this, but their like mental health is not in a good spot to just say, all right, I'm going to like, you know, start all over again and like think about concurrent and like take what I know and reimagine education. And like, they just, I don't know that they just like have it in them, you know, because I feel like it's not that, they have the synthesis and analysis and reflective skills and the collaboration in their teams. They have all the tools. Like, I know they can do it, you know, but it's just too much. They're so overwhelmed. They're like, it's March, you know, what do I have to do till June? And then I'm like reevaluating whether I want to be in teaching at all. And I'm like, you do want to be in teaching. You do. You went into education very altruistically. You love your students. You're just burned out. You need a break.
And that's where I'm hoping that this fall, like after teachers have had time to reflect, like they've got good stuff. They've learned so many amazing things during this virtual time. They love their kids. Like, I'm hoping just they're going to all go back, and a lot of them are just going to say, we're going back to the way things used to be because it's what I'm familiar with. It's where my lessons are. I can take something off my plate for now. And I'm hoping that with some reflection this fall, we're going to see some really good stuff, because teachers are great. I mean, they've got
Agreed.
stuff.
They are.
They're
Time is
definitely
like
good.
to do it.
Good.
It's
Hillary.
interesting though, don't you feel there's a cognitive dissonance that's happening in all of this, right? Because everyone's been in fight or flight for a year. We're coming on a year of everyone being in full on fight or flight mode, all of us. And that everyone, of course, with variability, everyone responds differently to that. Some people can really rise with that, and some people struggle really bad with that. And all of those conditions are fine. There's no judgment in that. But the cognitive dissonance that I'm seeing is when teachers are trying to default to what they've always done in a current environment that doesn't match that in any way, shape, or form. And so there's frustration that needs to be acknowledged, but then there's also support. And so a lot of it, that point of that motivation to want to learn or to try something different or to take those risks isn't there when you're in fight or flight a lot of the time, because you're just trying to get through every moment of every day, and it feels very heavy. And if you're a special educator right now, you feel it probably 25 times more, because I don't know how many districts had plans that were made that had no consideration for special education services or occupational therapy, or how those were going to fit into the plans. So you have special education teachers that are just super duper burnt out because they've had to do what they've needed to do. And in my situation, we had a staff member unfortunately die right before Christmas, who was a case manager, long-term veteran, not of COVID, but either it just was horrible, very tragic and unexpected. Long-term sub not able to cover or to support. Yours truly gets called in to case manage and teach on top of everything else. Talk about cognitive dissonance. But there was an opportunity on that. But part of that's mindset and inner work. So everyone's trying to do this inner work, and that lack of awareness of yourself as a learner, like as an adult, how do we then pass it on to our kids, that to have some of that resiliency, or to say, you know what, I really need a break. Some of this stuff isn't important. Let's just make sure you're okay in this moment, and that we can create learning opportunities that have those skill sets embedded. You know, I had an ed tech that really needed to learn because they were asking, the supervising teacher was asking her to teach remotely, and her tech skills were just non-existent, and that's okay. So I was doing some coaching, and what came out of it was this. I was resisting. So the suffering that was being created by her was her resistance to learning that new skill. So what we did was we broke it down to like the microcosm, right? Because you shape. So we're shaping. What do we do? Okay, I want your goal. What's a reasonable goal for you in this 1 week? Present. I want to use Google Meet. Okay, so let's log into a Meet. Okay, done. Next. I want to present one thing and one tool, Kami. So let's hang our hat on Kami and Google Meet. Okay. Now you've gotten present a tab. I'm good with that. Watch me do it. I'm proud of you. Next. Oh, well, I got to do 2. I'm getting stuck. Okay. So here's what we're going to do with that. I'm going to make you a video on how to do that so you can see what I'm talking about. But actually actively involving her in that process and asking those pointed questions. What is reasonable for you at this time? What's one thing you can do without feeling overwhelmed or overstressed that will make you feel better about your technology skills and that you can move forward? And that feels so much better than shoving a bunch of stuff at her and going, okay, call me when you're done, which is what we've tended to do. It feels much. So how do we then take that and replicate that in a larger scale and do that with staff when we're doing that? And we're actually designing some training in the next couple of weeks about engagement, the UDL engagement guidelines, but walking them through that by modeling the tools to engage the teachers through various supports, but also having them come up with answers using the innovator's compass to flush that out so that they already know they're probably doing some of that work already, but here's how you want to extend it. But give them ways that they can access that goal based on where they're currently at and where we want to take them forward, which is a huge flip for a lot of people. But fortunately, I have a wonderful instructional strategist that thinks that this is fabulous and wants to do that collaboratively. So hoping that that space of 45 minutes for the next couple of weeks will lead teachers to be able to kind of relax a little bit and understand that they're all doing the best they can with what they've got, but that they have supports to help them move forward.
Yeah, I had something similar to that, Hillary, this idea of finding your little successes. And I was talking to a ed tech coach that I work with the other day. And she said, do you want to see what I've been working on for the past couple of weeks? I'm like, well, yeah, okay, sure. It is a list of every little success the staff has had throughout this time. She's been collecting it all year and she didn't tell anybody. Now she's finally ready because she started to organize it a bit. And it's all these little, she calls it her silver lining list is what she's calling it. And it's just all these little tabs of these little things that successes that staff had with Google Meet, with virtual instruction. And she's kind of broken it into these larger areas, but then in it is these very practical solutions that staff have come up with, which I thought, oh, what a cool way to show people, because what she's going to do kind of at their year-end wrap up, and this is how it came up in our conversation. We were talking about the idea that people are burnt. Lauren said it, it was exactly true, right? People are fried. So, and now, and I think Cassie said this, you know, it's March and people are like, all right, March is this close to the end of the year in most people's minds. So it's hard to kind of engage them potentially in something new now. But if we wait for September to hope that some of these things will carry over, hope is great. Reality is maybe not so much. So maybe we need to prod that along a little bit. And so I was talking to this coach about, wouldn't it be cool as we got towards the end of the year if we gave kind of these ideas to staff to kind of chew on over the summer, and we found ways to check back in with them every once in a while. And that was our discussion. What constitutes once in a while without being obnoxious about it? So we're trying to figure out our balance here. And so I said to her, it would be great if we could connect with them every few weeks, every 3 weeks, and just check in and maybe throw out something to get them thinking or have some kind of interaction. And that's when she showed me her list. And so we're going to use her list as the entrance to these people in these conversations over the summer to go beyond the hoping it changes, to actually help kind of push the needle along a little bit in a way that is not overbearing on their summer. Because I get it. I get it. I have those weeks just like everybody else. I feel for you guys that are in schools every day. My life is a little different being a consultant, and Karen's now left to go consult or do whatever we do. And so it's a little different, but I have those days like everybody else where I'm like, nah, I think I'm going to just shut my computer off today. And I think I'm going to just walk away. I think that's probably best. And so we all need that. And so finding ways to support the teachers in that time, which could be really powerful because they have those opportunities to have stepped away a little bit.
Quick
And so
question,
I think those are the things that we're working on now, is how to get that learning happening a little, that coaching to happen throughout the summer now.
Coaching also might can come from their colleagues too. You know, like
Yeah.
that's the other piece of this also is like I've seen it myself. I'm in 5 buildings in an elementary school district. Like the teachers are helping each other. They're inspiring one another. So it's not just the coaching that's coming from me, because I am, and they default to me a lot for a lot of things, you know, and I'm trying to break that, you know, tendencies and that, you know, dependence, you know, to be like, Leslie, how do I, and I'm like, you know how to do this, you can do it. But you know, it's seeing, like Hillary was saying, like seeing the good in what everybody is doing and, you know, realizing that you're not reinventing the wheel. You're just maybe, I don't know, spinning it a little bit differently, you know, so, you know, it looks a little different. And so, you know, they see what their colleagues are doing. And I'm like, look, you know, and they're able to, especially because we use, you know, a platform that's very shareable because we use Seesaw in my district. So that also helps too, you know, that they're sharing the materials with one another. So that, you know, everybody doesn't feel like I'm on my own and on an island. You know, and I think that's a big piece of it because yes, everybody is definitely, like Cassie said, everybody is very overwhelmed and, you know, and saturated. I always like use the analogy of like a sponge, you know, like you can only put so much water on a sponge and then there's just the runoff. Like, you know, at some point, like I feel like we've been at the runoff stage now for a while. And so anything else that we're throwing at them is not really necessarily absorbing because everybody, like I get emails all the time, like, you know, I'm on like my tech email from my department, you know, where people ask for help. And like some of the questions, I'm always like, oh my God. But like, you know, then I look at it and I'm like, people are asking this because, and they're obvious questions, things that like they should know. But like, I get it. I'm like, it's just the runoff. I'm like, they can't, you know, they can't hold on to all this information. And it's just, you know, and, you know, we understand that and we're patient with our students about it. You know, we need to be understanding and patient with each other about it too, you know, as adults, because we're all in it. That's for sure.
Yeah, Leslie, you know, I was just thinking about that. It's like some people when you're talking with them, oh God, it just slipped my mind. I was just gosh. Okay, never mind. I'll think of it.
Okay.
It's like I had it and then it was run off.
Yeah, that's weird. What's that like? I've never experienced that. No.
Not the last 5 minutes for me.
Yeah, right. But maybe as you sit and think about it, Lauren, and then just burst in when you remember it. Because Hillary said it in the chat, and I think you're right, Hillary. This idea of people are starting to question themselves. Do I know this? Did I know this? Right? It's all of those kind of questions, and sometimes our job is as simple as saying, "Yeah, of course you knew that, and that's exactly how you would do that. That was perfect." Right? Throw a little affirmation.
I thought of it.
You thought of it? Go.
I did. It's this whole concept of like fast and slow, right? We've got this like super fast world that's like moving technology, light speed. We got to like change and do all this. But like we need to move so slow and spend so much more time with like what Hillary was saying, Leslie, and what you were saying. Like we need to really coach people and support them where they are because people experience, I don't want to say some people experience trauma. This is very traumatic to some people. Some people experience just like life overhaul, and maybe it wasn't traumatic. It was something that they could deal with, but it's just really flipped everything on its head. And like they do have the skills and they do have the resiliency to get through, but just meeting every individual where they are, that's like the slow part. And so the individual coaching and sometimes individual consulting and coaching, flipping between the two, like meeting them where they are, saying like, well, what's your goal? What do you want to learn? Let me tell you a little bit about this tool, feature, something that you're going to try. How do you think then you could apply this? And then going back to consulting or going back to the coaching. That's so hard, this like whole, and I think that's what Hillary's talking about, this like cognitive like dissonance. It's like the fast world and the slow world all like at the same time. And I think the kids are experiencing this too. You know, it's not just unique to educators, administrators, adults, you know, parents. It's everybody. And there's like not enough time to reflect and sort of talk about this.
Yeah. There's not, and are people reflecting about it? Like, I'm curious, are your schools asking the students what they've thought of this learning experience?
No, they need to.
Yeah.
So we went back to like we had some students in hybrid, and we have a bunch of parents that were like, great, the kids are back in school. Rip those iPads out of their hand. No more technology. I sent them to school in person because like, I don't want them to be on a device. They've already been on a device 5 days a week. And they're like, no, no, no. And so they started talking about paper and pencil, and I just about lost it. And Mike, when you said this at the beginning of this conversation, I was like, no, 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 we're not going back there.
Right?
But isn't that the missed opportunity of UDL where you can have both and both are fine? That my husband and I go through hour-long, like we spend our nights, my husband and Leslie will tell you, my husband and I like will spend hour-long, like evenings talking about stuff like this. And he owns his own business, but it's so fascinating to hear his perspective. But we talk about the broad brush of everything, right? That has nothing to do with variability in any way, shape, or form. You think about businesses, for example, and taxing and blah, blah, blah. He's very small. So it should not be the same broad brush that you would do with a Walmart any more than you would do that with staff or with teachers. So tech is a tool, but paper and pencil are a tool. It's not one or the other. It's both. It's like remediation or AT. It's not one or the other. It's both. Right. You can have it all, people.
Exactly. The
it's not that
yes.
hard. And right? it's called UDL. And I know I'm oversimplifying it when I say it because there's so much deeper work that happens when you start to think that way. But okay, if you want paper, I'm going to give this to you in Google Drive and give you the option to print it. You want to print it all day, every day, have a nice day. If I've got my classroom set up, I'm going to have the tech, but I'm also going to have paper available to you or give you the option to print that assignment off and do what you need to do and take a picture and send it to me, yada, yada, yada. But that's the important part. It's not one or the other. It's both. There's not one that's better than the other because maybe paper's better for you, Lauren, but it might not be what's best for me. And so that's both of those are okay. So for me, it's getting teachers and getting parents and getting everybody else on board with that kind of thinking so that when variability does happen, we're not freaking out about it. And we're not having this cognitive or being under such stress about it because it feels like it's so overwhelming. You know, that's, to me, that's where I hope we can get to. And I think we really can when we have more conversations like this and it grows and grows and grows. It's like the, gee, your hair smells terrific thing. He tells his friends and so on and so on. It's going to grow, but it is public education. As you know, it takes a really long time for things to shift in any way, shape, or form. Yeah.
But I have so interesting, this idea, you know, because I've been hearing us talk about this as we go through, and you know, Cassie saying how the parents wanted everybody back, and Lauren saying that, and that's why I asked this idea about anybody ask the kids what they wanted out of this, because it is interesting. I tell you that student that I mentioned before who moves around his house with his Chromebook, I know what he's going to say. Well, I know because I asked him. I was doing a interaction with him, and and I asked him a whole bunch of questions about school now, and his answer was, "School's not really that bad." And you know what? I'll take that from this student. That's a glowing endorsement from this student. School's not that bad, because trust me, last year when I saw him in school was bad. So this is a good thing. But I'm just curious where everybody else is. And, I only see such a snapshot of students. I just see a handful every week. And I'm always curious because it's one of the things I ask all of them, like, how's it going with this? Like, what did you think? Because I don't know that anybody else is asking them. Well, I got a brainstorm of this when I teach a master's class too, and they're all virtual this semester, so they can't be in person. And our first class, we're supposed to meet for 3 hours one time a week. Well, let me see. The key piece there is we're supposed to do that. We're not doing that because that's torturous. And so I said to them the first week, I said, what we're going to do is we're going to break this up and we're going to talk for a little bit. You're going to go off and you're going to shut your computer off and do something about what we're talking about. They're going to come back for a little bit, and then I'm going to let you loose to work on something that you don't have to do until next week, and then we'll talk about it. It'll equal 3 hours somehow in my world. It'll equal 3 hours. And so we did that the first week, and I have 17 students in my class. I got 3 emails to me after that said, you know what? You're the last class we're taking in this master's program, and this is the first time that someone hasn't just spoken to us straight at us for 3 hours. and they were like, oh, this is going to be fun. And I think I'm going to learn something here too. And again, those are all positive things, but thinking about, what does that learner need? Just punching the clock and putting the time in is not the answer there. I can't turn the Zoom on at 4:30 and turn it off at 7:30 and call everybody learned for 3 hours. It's just not going to work out. So thinking about ways to do that is so critical. So who put this long thing? Jennifer. Wow. That was a note there, Jennifer.
I was just talking about, the funding. So many districts have gotten funding through the CARES Act to support a lot of the technology. And when that is done, how are we going to pay to continue a lot of these supports? I mean, we are a Google district, so we've always had Google Classroom, which, may or may not be a learning management system, a formal one at least. But then for our elementary, we purchased Seesaw, and we had teachers who had used the free version in the past, but now we all have paid versions, and I'm curious to see if our district finds it as something that they want to continue paying for in the future.
Yeah, I think that'll be interesting, Jennifer. And, it's part of that conversation we have to have when we start buying something, right? Like, how are we going to evaluate this throughout the process? It's not just, we could say this for any piece of AT, right? It's not just buying it for the sake of buying it. Oh, we got some money, let's buy some stuff. Okay. But if we're not evaluating as we go through, how do we even know at the end whether it was useful or not?
Well, we purchased even like double robots right before the pandemic, and they've been sitting in our office. I mean, we had some before, but we purchased more for some of our homebound students, and it's completely changed the conversation because now we have webcams in every single classroom. Is that something that is even needed anymore? So it'll be interesting. It will really drive a lot of the decisions and conversations we have in the future, just the level of technology. And I don't think, we had teachers who would be like, absolutely not. I don't want that double robot in my classroom. Somebody's watching me. And now everybody's gotten so used to it that I think, it's just changed so many conversations. And it will be really interesting moving forward to see how much of that sticks, I guess.
Yeah, I think you're right. I've had that conversation with someone who would not put a live scribe pen in their classroom last year for a student for note taking, but now this year they do everything in Google Meet and record everything that everybody has access to. So my comment is, well, what's the difference? And the teacher said, well, it's different. And I had to point out to her, no, it's really not. It's exactly the same. So can we look at the pen? This is a teacher who actually called the teachers union on me because I brought a pen into trial in the classroom. I brought a live scribe pen in. That was the most recent time I've been called to the principal's office because I was in another classroom, and I got called over the loudspeaker into the principal's office. And the student I was working with, fourth grader, goes, "Ooh, Mr. Mike, you're in trouble." I was like, yeah, it sounds like it. I don't know. But yeah, it will make them rethink it, Jennifer. I think that's a great conversation to have. I'm excited for those conversations.
That's a really great point, Mike, because I think the difference in some teachers' heads is that part of control. Because you're saying they're recording the Google Meet, they're posting it, they're setting it out for everybody. It's in their control. If the student's bringing a live scribe pen, the teacher doesn't know what's being recorded, even though they do, but it's not their recording to share. So I think there's just kind of that difference or that fear of somebody else recording me versus me recording me.
Yeah.
But when you record this meeting, you tell everybody, okay, I'm going to be recording now. So maybe even it's just talking with teachers about the student even saying, okay, I'm going to record in class so that the teacher's aware. And there might just need to be a little bit of that ownership or kind of that notification of to kind of bridge that gap between individual recording and whole classroom recording.
It's true. Yeah, it's so interesting, Cassie, because before we went virtual in this school, the solution I had proposed to this teacher was you keep the pen and hand it to the student when you feel it's a note-taking opportunity. So there was some control, and that did not go well. That wasn't going to happen. But yet now, as I've shown her throughout the virtual learning moment, She records these lessons. We have audio. I've showed her how to push it through something to get a transcription of it. And she's even said at times, wow, that's really cool. Okay, it sure is. Wouldn't it be cool if I got that as an accommodation because I needed it for my IEP because it says it on my IEP? Wouldn't that be cool? And so it's bringing up these conversations that luckily in this case, this teacher who I thought was going to just really just not be happy about this conversation, she had one of those moments where she kind of was like, yeah, I don't know if it's any different actually. And so that was good. And now we have this ongoing discussion about what this might look like. And so I feel like that's another one of my little positives of this, is that it's made people look at this little differently. And this idea of maybe not just for that one student, going to Hillary's comment, maybe this is something we give for everybody and it's a UDL component of my lesson. You need to go back and review it. Imagine that you could if you wanted to.
Well, and I feel like we're going to have to, as a whole, like start bringing up those positives, like, wow, it worked really well for you. But also, you know, the behavior specialist in me is going to come back from the fact that we all feel like we need to be in control of our environments. We all feel like we need to have some form of input. And our teachers, just like our students, have lost that. They don't have control over their lessons, or if it's going to be virtual, or if it's going to be face-to-face, or how it's going to go today. And so I feel like there's going to be some who are going to say, but no, this is how I'm doing it now, because I can. And so I think sometimes bringing back in that positive, but it worked really well for you. You did an awesome job with that. Those positives, and really helping them understand that they did this. Like, you use these new tools, you recorded your classroom and got a transcription, you know, yay, Mike says live scribe, but you did this. Like,
I think the other important thing to remember too, though, is the role of the IEP. And if we've given these students these tools and they're working for the student now, we need to make sure we're documenting and writing that into the IEP so that they have those tools or those features in the future. And then it becomes well, we have to provide it because of the IEP. And it, you know, legally it has to be in there. We have to provide it. So I think we can kind of ride that wave a little, as long as we're making sure that we're writing those IEPs correctly.
Yeah. And also along the same lines as what we just talked about, Jennifer, with Seesaw, are we tracking successes? Are we measuring outcomes as we're going? Are we measuring the success of how we're doing with this tool as we're going, so that we could say later, hey, the use of a transcription really helped this student in these virtual sessions the same way this other tool might when they're back in person? Or it's the same strategy. How are we going to, the tool is just a different way to get there. Then we start having that conversation of, it's not about the tool, it's about the strategy, right? And that's the great conversation, is because we can now I have this ammunition for this teacher to say, remember how effective that transcription strategy was for that student. And then she's going to have no choice but to say, yeah, it was really great. So, okay, how can we do that in the classroom to provide that same level of support for this student? How can we do that? What does that look like?
And I think, you know, directing that conversation back to the student need. What is the student's need? And then, like you said, what is the strategy or what is the feature that meets that need? And that really needs to be what drives the conversation. So I think if we continue to have those conversations honestly, we're going to have to continue to provide some of the tools that have been provided during virtual learning to make these students successful.
Yeah. And for this situation, it meant taking the tool out of the conversation. Because if I told her, let's go back to the live scribe pen, she would not want to go for it. But if we go, let's go back to a transcript of what was said, well, it's different. All right, guys, it's 1 o'clock. Is Sarah still here? No, she left. I wanted to prove to her that once again, we could fill an hour without a plan. Love it. Love it. All right, guys. Other final thoughts before we leave? Give anybody a chance to say whatever's on your mind. No? Okay, good enough. All right, guys. Have a great week. Maybe we'll see you Wednesday for AT Chat. If not, we'll see you next Monday, maybe. Have a good week. Bye, everybody.